Nestled in the heart of Pinewood Village was an ancient church, long abandoned and cloaked in whispers of mystery. It was known as St. Elric's Chapel, and it stood on the outskirts, its Gothic arches overgrown with vines and its cracked stone walls exuding an aura of untold stories. Among the villagers, it was a place to avoid, except for 5 young men who sought adventure: Ray, Martin, Elias, Omar, and Yusuf. Ray, the group's self-proclaimed leader, was the most curious. His dark, inquisitive eyes gleamed at the slightest hint of intrigue. Martin, the joker of the group, often masked his fear with humor. Elias, a budding historian, was a walking encyclopedia who saw the chapel as an untapped archive. Omar, the voice of reason, often tried to steer the group away from trouble but was too loyal to abandon them. Yusuf, the quietest of the bunch, was an artist with a knack for capturing fear and wonder in his sketches. One late afternoon, the group gathered at the edge of the village, staring at the silhouette of the chapel against the fading sun. "Are you all ready?" Ray asked, hoisting his flashlight. "Ready to find a ghost, you mean?" Martin chuckled nervously. "It's just an old building," Elias reassured. "The stories are probably exaggerated. Still, there might be artifacts inside." "I don't like this," Omar muttered, shaking his head. "But I'm not letting you all go in alone." Yusuf nodded silently, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. The chapel's heavy wooden doors groaned as they pushed them open. A faint, musty smell wafted out, and their flashlights revealed a scene frozen in time. Dust-covered pews sat in disarray, and a shattered chandelier lay on the stone floor. The faint glow of the setting sun filtered through a broken stained glass window, casting eerie patterns on the walls. Elias examined the engravings on the walls. "These are older than I thought. Probably 13th century. "Great," Martin quipped. "We're breaking into a medieval haunted house." Ray pointed his flashlight toward the altar. Behind it was a trapdoor, slightly ajar. "You're kidding," Omar said, spotting it. "We're not going down there." "We came this far," Ray countered. "A little deeper won't hurt." "It's always a little deeper with you," Omar muttered, but followed the others as they descended the narrow staircase. The air grew colder, and the scent of damp earth intensified. At the bottom was a crypt, its stone walls adorned with faded murals. Strange symbols were etched into the floor, radiating from the center of the room, where an ornate sarcophagus rested. "This is incredible," Elias whispered, running his fingers over the carvings. "These symbols are—" "Creepy," Martin interrupted. "They're creepy. Let's not touch anything," Omar said firmly, stepping closer to the group. Ray couldn't help but approach the sarcophagus. "There's writing here," he said, brushing off the dust. "Yusuf, can you sketch this?" Yusuf crouched down and began to draw, his pencil scratching against the paper. "Guys," Elias said, his voice shaking slightly. "These symbols are warnings. Something about protecting the seal and not disturbing the—" A low rumble interrupted him. The room trembled slightly, and the crypt door slammed shut. "What was that?" Martin yelped, his voice echoing. "Ray, what did you touch?" Omar demanded, glaring at him. "Nothing," Ray protested, but his face betrayed his guilt. The air grew heavy, and an unnatural chill swept through the room. A faint whisper seemed to emanate from the sarcophagus, growing louder. "We need to leave," Omar said urgently. The whisper morphed into a guttural groan as the lid of the sarcophagus began to shift. The group froze, their flashlights trembling. Suddenly, the lid slid open, and a skeletal figure draped in decayed robes emerged. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly, and its bony hand gripped a rusted sword. "Who dares disturb my rest?" the figure demanded, its voice a blend of anger and sorrow. The group backed away, their breaths shallow. "It wasn't intentional," Ray stammered. "We didn't mean to—" "Silence!" the figure bellowed. "For centuries I guarded this place, keeping the darkness at bay. Your intrusion has weakened the seal." "The seal?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. "The barrier," the figure explained, "that holds the shadow wraiths captive. Without it, they will escape and consume the living." The crypt began to shake again, and faint, sinister whispers filled the air. "Restore the seal," the figure commanded, "or all will be lost." "How do we do that?" Omar asked, stepping forward despite his fear. The figure gestured to a pedestal near the sarcophagus. On it lay an ancient tome, its pages brittle with age. "Follow the instructions within," the figure said. "But beware, the wraiths will not let you succeed easily." The group exchanged uneasy glances but knew they had no choice. Elias carefully opened the tome, his flashlight illuminating the faded text. "These are rituals," he said, his voice steadying. "We'll need to gather components from different parts of the crypt." "Of course we do," Martin muttered. "It couldn't be easy." The group split up reluctantly, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. Yusuf and Martin searched for ancient candles. Omar and Elias looked for a ceremonial dagger, and Ray scoured for a sacred artifact described in the tome. As they moved through the crypt's labyrinthine corridors, the whispers grew louder, and shadows seemed to dance just beyond the edges of their lights. Martin and Yusuf found a small alcove lined with crumbling shelves. On one shelf sat a set of ancient candles, their wax oddly untouched by time. "Got them," Martin said, grabbing the candles. But as he turned, a shadowy figure lunged at him. He screamed, dropping his flashlight. Yusuf swung his sketchbook instinctively, the pages colliding with the shadow. To their surprise, it recoiled, dissipating into mist. "Paper beats ghost?" Martin panted, picking up his flashlight. "Let's move," Yusuf urged, clutching his sketchbook tightly. Meanwhile, Omar and Elias found the ceremonial dagger embedded in a stone slab. As Elias pulled it free, the slab cracked and skeletal hands emerged, clawing at them. "Run!" Omar shouted, pulling Elias away. They sprinted back to the central chamber, the skeletal hands retreating as they crossed the threshold. Ray returned last, holding a small, glowing orb, the sacred artifact. His face was pale, and his hands trembled. "The shadows. They're everywhere," he said breathlessly. Elias quickly arranged the items on the pedestal and began reciting the incantation from the tome. The room quaked violently, and the shadows coalesced into monstrous forms, their glowing eyes fixed on the group. "Keep them back!" Elias shouted as he continued the ritual. Yusuf flung his sketchbook at one of the shadows, stunning it momentarily. Martin grabbed a broken piece of wood and swung wildly, keeping another at bay. Omar and Ray worked together to push the sarcophagus lid over, creating a makeshift barrier. The glowing orb began to pulse, and a beam of light shot from it, piercing the shadows. The crypt was filled with a deafening roar as the shadows disintegrated, their forms reduced to nothingness. Elias finished the incantation, and the symbols on the floor began to glow. The sarcophagus lid slid back into place, and the crypt fell silent. The skeletal figure reappeared, its glowing eyes now calm. "The seal is restored. You have done well, but your intrusion nearly doomed us all." "We're sorry," Omar said sincerely. The figure nodded. "Leave this place and tell no one of what you have seen. Let my rest be undisturbed." The group ascended the stairs, emerging into the fresh night air. The chapel stood silently behind them, its mysteries intact. As they walked back to the village, no one spoke. Each was lost in thought, the weight of their actions sinking in. Finally, Martin broke the silence. "Next time, can we just play video games?" The others chuckled weakly, their laughter breaking the tension. They knew they'd never forget the crypt or the lessons it taught them about curiosity, bravery, and the cost of disturbing what should remain forgotten. The end. In the quiet town of Elmswood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a group of lifelong friends gathered every weekend for adventures. Lucas, the confident leader, Tariq, the meticulous planner, Jonah, the storyteller, Adam, the tech genius, and Zaid, the silent but resourceful one, shared a bond forged by years of trust and shared escapades. Their adventures ranged from camping under the stars to exploring forgotten ruins. But none of them knew their next adventure would change their lives forever. It began on a crisp autumn morning when Tariq discovered an old, tattered map in his late grandfather's attic. The map was yellowed with age, its edges frayed, and its surface marked with faded ink. It depicted the woods surrounding Elmswood, with an uncharted trail leading to a spot marked with an X. Beneath the X was a cryptic note in Arabic that read, "Where the forgotten sleep, the seekers shall find." "This has to be something," Tariq said, spreading the map out on the table in Lucas's garage. "It could just be an old hunting trail," Jonah said, always the skeptic. "But what if it's not?" Lucas countered, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "We've never ventured that far into the woods," Zaid added, his voice steady as always. "Let's do it," Adam said, already packing his drone and camera. The next morning, with their backpacks stuffed with essentials, flashlights, ropes, snacks, and a first aid kit, the 5 friends set off. The air was crisp, the fallen leaves crunching under their boots as they followed the map into the forest. The first few hours were uneventful. They navigated winding paths, crossed shallow streams, and marveled at the serene beauty of the woods. But as they ventured deeper, the atmosphere changed. The trees grew taller and closer together, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sunlight. "This place is eerie," Jonah muttered, glancing around nervously. "Relax," Lucas said, though even he couldn't ignore the unsettling silence that had replaced the cheerful chirping of birds. By noon, they reached a clearing where the trail abruptly ended. In the center of the clearing stood a crumbling stone archway, covered in moss and vines. Beyond it was a narrow path that disappeared into the dense underbrush. "This must be it," Tariq said, consulting the map. They stepped through the archway, and the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew still, and a faint smell of damp earth lingered. "Anyone else feeling off?" Adam asked, adjusting his backpack. "It's just your imagination," Lucas said, though his grip on his flashlight tightened. The narrow path led them to a rocky outcrop overlooking a deep ravine. At the edge of the outcrop was an ancient stone staircase, its steps worn and cracked. "This is definitely not on any modern map," Zaid remarked, his voice tinged with awe. As they descended the staircase, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. At the bottom of the ravine, they discovered a massive iron door embedded in the rock face. It was adorned with intricate carvings of stars, moons, and unfamiliar symbols. "This is incredible," Tariq whispered, running his fingers over the carvings. "What do you think's behind it?" Jonah asked, his earlier skepticism giving way to excitement. "Only one way to find out," Lucas said. Adam examined the door, searching for a way to open it. "Looks like it needs some kind of key," he said, pointing to a circular indentation in the center. Tariq reached into his bag and pulled out a small, rusted medallion he had found with the map. It fit perfectly into the indentation. As he turned it, the door groaned and slowly swung open, revealing a dark passageway. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and their flashlights illuminated walls lined with murals depicting scenes of starry skies and men gazing at the heavens. At the end of the passage was a large chamber, its ceiling adorned with glowing crystals that bathed the room in a soft, bluish light. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal holding a small, ornate chest. "This feels like something out of a movie," Jonah said, his voice filled with wonder. "Let's see what's inside," Lucas said, stepping forward. As he lifted the chest, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The murals on the walls seemed to come to life, the painted figures moving and pointing to the ceiling. The glowing crystals began to pulse rhythmically, casting eerie shadows. "Put it back," Zaid shouted, his instincts kicking in. But before Lucas could react, the floor beneath them trembled. The chest slipped from his hands and fell to the ground, its lid popping open. Inside was a strange metallic orb etched with more symbols. The moment the orb was exposed, the room was flooded with a blinding light. When it subsided, the five friends found themselves standing in the same chamber. But something was different. The air was heavier, and the murals now depicted scenes of chaos and destruction. "What just happened?" Adam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we triggered something," Tariq said, his face pale. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. "You have awakened the trial of the Seekers." "Who's there?" Lucas demanded, his flashlight darting around the room. "The orb you have uncovered is a relic of great power," the voice continued, "but it cannot leave this place unless you prove yourselves worthy." "What do we have to do?" Zaid asked, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Face the trials," the voice said, "and the path will reveal itself." The ground beneath them shifted, and the chamber transformed into a vast maze, its walls made of shimmering, translucent stone. "We stick together," Lucas said firmly. The group navigated the maze cautiously, their flashlights barely penetrating the glowing walls. At every turn, they encountered challenges, puzzles to solve, riddles to answer, and obstacles to overcome. In one section, they faced a series of pressure plates on the floor, each marked with a different symbol. "Step on the wrong one, and we're done for," Adam said, analyzing the pattern. With his keen eye for detail, he guided them safely across. In another, they found themselves in a pitch-black room filled with whispering voices. "Ignore the whispers," Zaid said, leading them through with unwavering focus. Finally, they reached the center of the maze, where the orb hovered above a pedestal, its glow pulsating like a heartbeat. Surrounding it were 5 identical pedestals, each with a circular depression. "The medallion," Tariq said, realizing what needed to be done. Each of them placed their hands on the orb. It pulsed once, then split into 5 smaller orbs, each floating to a pedestal. The orbs emitted a soft hum as they settled into place. The maze walls dissolved, and the group found themselves back in the original chamber. The murals now depicted scenes of peace and unity, and the glowing crystals cast a warm, golden light. "You have proven yourselves," the voice said, now filled with warmth. "The relic is yours to protect. Guard it well, for it holds the power to unite or destroy." The chest closed itself, the orb safely inside. The 5 friends carried it back through the passageway and sealed the iron door behind them. As they ascended the staircase and emerged into the sunlight, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We can't tell anyone about this," Lucas said. "Agreed," Tariq said. "This is bigger than us." Adam nodded. "We'll keep it safe." As they made their way back to Elmswood, the forest seemed less foreboding, as if it had accepted them as its guardians. They didn't fully understand the power of the relic, but they knew one thing. Their bond had been tested and strengthened. They were no longer just friends. They were brothers, guardians of a secret that would forever tie them to the forgotten trail. The end.